that they came wishing to give. The conference organisers have suggested, could you kindly give your statements to the organisers, and they will make sure that they compile them and that the contents are reflected in the summing up at the end of the conference. So there's going to be a summing up session at the end of the day tomorrow. So if you could give your statements to the conference organiser, that's the way that will be handled. And certainly I'm sorry if there was any confusion about the format of this question and answer session or the way in which statements are to be handled. I think we're going to press straight on. I'd like to have a show of hands to see who would like to talk in the hall, just so I have a sense of that. I know that there's some more questions waiting from the internet. I think we've got a lot of issues there, both about particular state censorship, about the copyright issues, but I'd also like to make sure we don't lose some of the issues from the original presentations, including the questions around takedown and intermediary liability. So I would particularly ask you to think about those issues. Given the different points of view we had earlier, can I reinforce the message that this is for less than 1 minute, short, sharp questions or very brief comments. I'm going to start with the gentleman at the front here. You've been asking for the floor for a while. Microphone is coming.
Hello. I expressed my concerns to you, so I want to tell it once again. If you want to hold a panel on the state, for example, Azerbaijan, don't do it like in disguise for another name. Make a panel on Azerbaijan and give an opportunity to both sides, pros and contras, to express their opinions on the cases. And if you started to talk about Azerbaijan and create a bad PR, black PR for this country, I would like to stress a couple of words on the true freedom of internet situation in Azerbaijan. What's internet in Azerbaijan? I believe you don't know that. So I will tell a couple of figures and then ask a question to my friend.
Within the 1 minute, please. Okay?
Yeah, okay, I'll try. First of all, I hope you know that in Azerbaijan, 50% of the population have the access to internet. And I hope you know that the 10% of the population are active users at the Facebook. And 80% of them are young men from 16 years to 35 years. I hope you know that. I hope you know that now in Azerbaijan, internet becomes more mobile. We have around 10 million mobile phone numbers, which means that every citizen has a phone number, and we have a 3G and 4G connections in Azerbaijan. Moreover, I would like to say that in Azerbaijan there are no banned sites. You create an image of Azerbaijani government like something banning freedom of speech in the internet or freedom of expression. No banned sites. Top 5 sites are Google, Facebook, Mail.ru, Wikipedia, and YouTube,
okay,
which means that in Azerbaijan everybody can use them as a tool to express their opinions and share with their friends.
Can you come to your question then, please?
I'll come.
Thank you.
Just a couple of seconds. Moreover...
No, I'm sorry. Could you come to your question now,
My
please?
question is that, if you know these figures, I hope that my distinguished colleague Emin, which I know for years, I think that he is clever enough, knows these figures. Does he believe in what he says? And does he think that it's right to blame the president's office, especially, in the things that are under investigation now? And the president's office of Azerbaijan was the first body who blamed putting this video to the internet. I think you know.
Okay, it's a very clear question. Thank you.
Yeah, and
thank you. No, I'm
just
sorry.
a second.
No, I'm sorry. We are not going into another session where we argue about 3 minutes instead of 1 minute. So that's a very clear question. Thank you. I will now take another question, and then I will come back to Emin for an answer. There was a yes, gentleman at the back. Thank you. Of the mic at the back. Thank you.
Thomas Schneider from the Swiss government. I represent Switzerland, the ITU at the UN, in ICANN, Council of Europe, and other fora. And this is a personal remark. I'm slightly puzzled by the culture of discussion here. I participate in the Internet Governance Forum and in the EuroDIC, which is the European Internet Governance Forum that was held last week in Stockholm, on the basis of a multi-stakeholder approach as defined by the UN. in a way that before you start bashing each other, you start to understand each other, you start to try to be aware of your role, of the role of the others, whether you're the music industry or consumers, or whether you're one country or another country. I think if we first try to understand our roles, our concerns, our problems, they might even be legitimate, also the ones of the others. This is the first step in finding common solutions, agree on challenges. You might not agree on the solution yet, but in order to identify challenges and the real problems, I think we have to develop a culture of first trying to understand each other. And then the solutions are not that far away sometimes. We had in the Eurodic a discussion about copyright, where you had people from the music industry and people, young people who were using existing digital works to turn them into new ones. And there are challenges with copyright legislation. There are challenges with digital rights management when it's for libraries to add a tone layer or a text layer to an existing piece of art. These are problems that exist, but you can find solutions if you talk to each other, listen to each other, and respect each other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I think that follows on from the sort of request from the internet before for the break for people to come out of their silos. Gentleman in the middle there, please.
Hi there, my name's Tom Morrison-Bell. I work for Google here in Dublin. I wanted a question probably aimed at Professor O'Leary. Sorry, O'Flaherty. You mentioned NRHIs earlier. I was wondering if you had any insights on the role that transnational advocacy and transnational advocacy networks might play in preventing private companies from selling filtering technology to states that might use them for somewhat suspect reasons.
Okay, excellent. A question around the export of technology and some of the problems that were touched on in the first session this morning. I'm going to go first to Emin, and then I'm going to come back to the copyright issue, and then we'll come back to Michael. Emin, over to you.
So there were several questions, actually, in these comments and the question. I was asked if I believe in what I'm saying. My answer is yes, I absolutely do believe in what I'm saying, and I was in jail for using the free internet in Azerbaijan, and I give a credit to my colleague from Azerbaijan, and that's what I said actually in the side event today. It was just, not everyone was there. That was my arguing point, that the internet is actually, free in Azerbaijan. In technical terms, I mean, compared to what you have, even, in Turkey, there are, court makes decisions, banning websites and so on. In Azerbaijan, to my knowledge, there were just a couple of websites banned, closed, without court's decision, but just a couple. So you have, in Tajikistan, Facebook closed down. You don't have it in Azerbaijan. You have more than, according to government statistics, more than 50% of people having access to Azerbaijan, access to internet, which I don't question. But then it's a matter of figures. If you look at the latest research and see what is everyday, what is the number of people who have everyday access to internet, and in Katie Pierce's research, she shows that it's 70%. And I think unless you have everyday access to internet, you cannot talk, about if you just go on internet once a week or once a month, it's something else. So there are these details, and I should say that what my argument is, Azerbaijani government is not North Korea or Iran. We are a member of the Council of Europe, and basically what this government is doing, instead of listening to me, instead of having this debate here, I have no opportunity to have this debate on our state television in live, as you would have in any other a country, in most of the countries in Europe, all around the world. So that's a problem. And when saying that you are doing bad PR and so on, this is, I think, the problem, and we have seen the cultural problem today in this audience. I think it's about this division. When you criticize your government, who are you? Are you enemy of the state? Do you not love your country? Do you not care about your own people? You just want to say bad things about your nation. And when you talk about problems, this is how it's portrayed in media in Azerbaijan and in countries like Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, we entered the age where we have autocracies 2.0, and Azerbaijan, actually is the case where you say, and some academics, experts came up with a term to it, calling it networked authoritarianism. And you said that YouTube is free. There was a special research on the issue. What happened after me and Adnan were jailed after putting this video online about a donkey giving conference in Azerbaijan. And the research data shows that most of the people who were around us online, they got scared. So why should you actually close internet? Why should you do something which Tajik government does? You just can apply these methods. And then the case of Khadija, the problem is, you say why I talk about this.
Could you
just finishing last sentence,
briefly,
because actually she's my friend and I came to study in London. I gave the keys of my apartment to her so she takes care of my flat. And then what I see is there is a hidden camera in my flat. So I'm personally involved in this. And it's really hard to argue with me because things I'm talking about is not some theoretical things. It is happening in my life every day.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's also very interesting from this is one particular example of what also came up this morning about the way offline and online pressures and problems with freedom of expression go together. They're not in two silos, and we're going to come back to the point from the Swiss participant about the silos on copyright. But let me first broaden out, perhaps asking Agnes and Michael about the question about transnational advocacy around export of filtering or other technology that can be used in problematic ways. Michael, if you...
Okay. Yes, transnational advocacy with the private sector is, to my mind, critically important. In the first place, because it addresses something of a weakness in the international human rights protection system, which is about a relationship of the rights holder with a given state. There's a very, very strict relationship there, which doesn't sit well with the transnational phenomena, of which we saw some examples earlier, of how an action of a kid in Texas can have such an extraordinarily negative impact far away. And a system built on treaties of the kind I've just described has some difficulty in making a useful contribution to deal with problems of that type. Whereas the transnational advocates can, to some extent, ensure a comprehensive engagement wherever the phenomenon presents itself. Secondly, though, I'd suggest that for the advocacy of this kind, be it national or transnational, to be effective, it should root itself in the international human rights standards, the normative framework. Many sectors across recent history of the world have demonstrated that if you root your advocacy in the agreed international standards, you become much more effective. Children's activists will tell you that the day they got a convention on the rights of the child was the day you began to see a real difference in changing law policy and indeed the actions of the private sector. And finally, with regard to talking human rights with the private sector, we're in a different place today than the one we were in even 2-3 years ago. We now have the UN principles on human rights and business. They provide us with the basis, the legitimacy to talk this stuff with the private sector in a way that's meaningful. And in terms of the way, I'd refer back to what I said at the very outset. And if you'll allow me, just a quick word to the gentleman from Switzerland, because I completely agree with him. I don't know what tone the panel is setting off, but in terms of his broad point, he's quite right. We've got to listen to each other. We've got to engage with the complexity and together come up with the solutions. And I recall Anne's comment earlier about the multi-stakeholder approach, which is not just good, but it's necessary if we're to achieve any good in this area. I think that's what we're doing at this debate, in a sense. We're broadening our own mutual understanding towards coming up with solutions. So I think that was a very valuable injection into our discussion.
And yes, could I ask you to comment on this issue as well? I mean, when you have a country, for instance, like Pakistan puts out a $10 million tender for web surveillance technology, I mean, how should you as a human rights activist respond?
Yeah, it is an essential part of how national and international human rights organizations are advocating on internet freedom. I think we're just starting, because it does require quite a bit of evidence to be able to pinpoint to a particular company in the West selling particular tools to various governments. So I think most of us will approach it with a complete commitment to uncover what's happening, but also a commitment to accuracy and making the appropriate accusations and ensuring that they are well-founded. I will add to the transnational advocacy around the transfer of technology. I think there is another form of transnational advocacy which is required, which is against the transfer of legal norms, bad legal norms. What we have witnessed over the last decade or so is the bad laws being used and exported around the world to curtail freedom of expression or freedom of association and charity laws in particular. So there is a transnational process that needs to be responded to by a transnational advocacy.
Okay, that's great. And maybe just one last question to you, Agnes. I mean, we're talking about a range of types of countries here. Some are totalitarian, some are authoritarian, some are in transition, some are democracies. We may agree or disagree on the categorizations. But maybe the question of democracies can perhaps be the ones who let us down on this if they don't follow the standards.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that usually Western companies do sell these instruments of censorship, or indeed in the same way that some Western governments sell arms to non-Western governments sell arms to the Syrian government, in the same way we unfortunately have also a process whereby bad laws or just legal provisions from well-established democracies can be used and have been used by governments around the world to say, oh, but what are you talking about? Look at there, or look at the UK, or look at France. It's particularly clear in the relationship between freedom of expression, internet, and national security, and any issues regarding cyber securities. The models are heavily grounded in the Western approach to these issues. So my call to the audience here, particularly state representative, is to understand that these provisions and those laws will have babies, many babies that will be quite awful ones too. And the model that we want to put in place need to be far stronger than the one we have done so far on the questions related to internet in particular. Any forms of new regulations, as I mentioned earlier in the previous session, what we are looking at the moment is a decade of regressive legislation on internet. There are very few examples of a law that was put in place to strengthen access to internet or to strengthen freedom of expression on internet. Almost 90% of all laws that are related to internet are meant to control in a way which goes beyond what is permissible under international human rights law. And that doesn't only come from the so-called dictatorial regimes.
No, sure. And Michael, do you think we have the processes that allow us to stop just having a decade of regressive regulation? I mean, is it fora like this and the Internet Governance Forum, or should we be inventing something else? Do we have what we need?
Well, we certainly don't need to invent something else.
Right.
We need to wake up the international human rights regulatory framework to these issues. There's a whole range of bodies called the United Nations Human Rights Treaty Bodies. Most of whom have a direct relevance to these discussions. They're largely silent on the matters because civil society states haven't engaged with them to challenge them, to monitor states with these spectacles on and to come up with findings based on the international standards. So there's a vast untapped potential out there, and if meetings like this can trigger more engagement there, then that's a very useful thing.
Okay, I think that's very helpful. I'm just going to come back both to Corey and Helen before we come back to the audience. I think you were challenged in a way both before the coffee break and now afterwards. I don't think I'm a chair to bring you together in 5 minutes to a common position. That's probably too much. But in terms of just responding to those requests to, in a sense, can we have a more open debate, or can we go back to basics? If you're trying to resolve what we're talking about here, which is authors and artists earning a living in some way, we're talking about extraordinary new and liberating technology. We're talking about quite strong public opinion out there. It's not unified, but we've seen those extraordinary demonstrations. If you were going to your basic 1, 2, or 3 principles, what would you say, Corey?
Well, I mean, you know, I often say at the start of a talk that I'm not interested in giving a talk about copyright because, frankly, I'm not interested in how, like, doctors bill their patients and manage their billing cycles. I don't see why anyone should be interested in how I, as a professional, manage to bring money in and put money out again. The thing that's important about copyright isn't the earnings that it brings in and the earnings that it puts out. The thing that's important to people who aren't in the creative industries anyway. The thing that's important about copyright is what it does to everybody else. And, you know, I advocate for a copyright system that has as few externalities as possible. I would love a copyright system that limited its energy to regulating the industry of different kinds of creativity, and that left culture and all the other endeavors that involve copies because they're on the internet out. That's what I hope for.
So your bottom line, in a way, is to limit, as you say, as few externalities as possible. Helen, where are your kind of bottom lines faced with these challenges? Where are they?
Well, I think that it is obviously right to discuss, to talk to each other, and so Corey has this idea that he can collect a lot of money from music lovers. I think that maybe we should talk about that, because I would be actually quite interested to see how that system would work. So let's talk about that.
Okay, so let's explore new models
and
see if they're feasible and realistic. Okay, I think that is some small amount of opening out of the discussion. I'm going to ask Robert to bring in just 1 or 2 questions from the internet, please, at this point.
So just a couple of comments. People were keen with the comment that came earlier in regards to the Swiss delegate in terms of other spaces where these type of issues are being discussed, such as Eurodig and IGF, where there's a common understanding and a conversation that takes place first, recognizing we have differences of opinion, but trying to speak at it is a good model. And then a comment that came in that we think might be more appropriate for tomorrow. There was an issue of blasphemy on Facebook and how that was issued or how that was dealt with. So I think one of the questions, I think maybe going back to your earlier point, getting some of this, is the role of companies. And so you're talking about a lot of the human rights bodies and the mechanisms, but all the activity takes place in social media that's actually run by companies. So in a way, they're the investigators, the arbitrators of their own decision, and no one's overseeing them. And so I'm just curious in terms of, in the case of Facebook, Twitter, or whatever the next company will be 5 years from now, you know, how is it that they can be more consistent with human rights norms and not necessarily the norms of the country where they're based?
Okay, I think that's a crucial and very big question. I think I'll start with Michael, but anyone on the panel who wants to contribute, I think this relates to a lot of the different issues we've been discussing so far in this session.
Let's take blasphemy first, briefly, because it's one of tomorrow's issues, I guess, or the context of tomorrow. I just reiterate what Frank LaRue said this morning. You deal with blasphemy online just like you deal with it in any other medium. And the same regulatory framework applies, which recognizes that freedom of religion and belief has to be protected, just as freedom of expression has to be protected. And you have to find a pathway through the relationship of those two rights, which allows a very limited space for the state to restrict blasphemous expression, but that's as far as it can go. And again, the body on which I sit, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, said just a few months ago that regulation of blasphemy is only permissible to the extent that it's necessary to avoid the promotion of violence and discrimination against any given group. So it's no different to blasphemy in any other context. And that's, I think, the key message we have to keep remembering. The internet doesn't create brand new, unique and distinct issues that require brand new, distinct and unique responses. In terms then of companies, I just recall what I said earlier, which is we all recognize that the international human rights regulatory framework applies to states. But that's crucial in order to protect the space for companies. A large part of what we're talking about is ensuring that states allow the companies to thrive within the limits of law and proper behavior, but to thrive. And that's why we have to talk about states here. We also have to talk about states to provide companies with guidance as to what are the legitimate and the illegitimate interferences in their work by the state. And ultimately then, as I said earlier, we can now talk about human rights and business, including these treaties and business, because of the strides that have been made by the United Nations around this issue in the last few years.
But in terms of specific ways, we might then see companies behaving differently. I mean, would you say other companies should have a transparency report like Google does, or is it that countries should be having transparency reports?
Well, let me answer that with an example. I heard a woman interviewed this morning on Irish radio. She may well be in the room, I don't know, from Google, talking about how they manage the requests that come from states to take material down. And she explained, and I can't assess this, I can't vet it, I have no inside knowledge, but she explained that they actually have a set of principles by which they determine if the request from the state is a legitimate one or otherwise. For example, she said, if it appears to be a purely whimsical administrative request as opposed to something deriving from a strong legal base, that they won't pay attention to it. And so that by way is an example of how this could apply in the context of the companies themselves applying the international human rights standards.
Well, a number of people have argued an index among them, and I'm going to come to you, Agnes, on this one, that actually companies shouldn't take things down without a court order, because otherwise they're making the sort of judgments you just described. Agnes?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it is one of the most difficult issues, both practically and normatively. How do we deal with millions of content being posted online, with the millions of complaints that are being made on some of those content? From the standpoint of the old standard regarding the rule of law and the role of the law and the role of the legal enforcers, any form of censorship should be based on a legal reading of the law. It should not be left in the hand of even a well-meaning company with some good guidelines. From the standpoint of Article 19, we are immensely worried by the fact that such an important task as the regulation of content, of what we say and how we say it, should be left to a private company which has absolutely no legitimacy in that context. Now, it does leave the question open as to how do we do it given the large amount of material that is being posted, and at least Article 19 is exploring various ways through which there could be some form of administrative procedures before falling directly into a full-blown judicial processes, some form of mediation as well. I think there is enough creativity within the legal system, or paralegal or quasi-judicial, that will allow the regulation of content on the internet to be done in a way which is not left to a private company only to take care of.
Okay. Yes, do, yeah, and I'm just going to bring the others in.
I disagree with Agnes in the least. I entirely support what she's just said.
Okay. Corey, yes.
I want to push back slightly on what you said, because while I agree in general with the principle that blocking for things like blasphemy or any other kinds of bad speech should be minimal and in consideration with other areas, I want to talk about the externalities that arise when we start to create regimes to make it easy to remove speech from the internet, because we have a 15-year evidentiary record on this. We know what happens when we do it. And what happens when you create easy notice and takedown? Or what happens when you allow surveillance of social networks, including private flagged material, to follow the chain to the originator of bad speech? Is you go from a system that is as secure and robust as the people who made it can achieve, to a system that has deliberate flaws, to a system that has inherently unmanageable and unaccountable systems for removal of content, censorship, and surveillance. For the same reason that it's very, very hard to find all the blasphemous material on the internet and ask to have it removed, or find all the infringing material and ask to have it removed, it's likewise impossible for people who are on the receiving end of those requests to give them all their due judgment. No one's going to, apart from a company as well-resourced as Google, very few firms could afford that burden. And so what you end up with is vast overblocking and trivial removal of material, which often happens at critical junctures, like on election night, or after the roundup and arrest of dissidents, where all of a sudden there's an enormous amount of requests, and the companies, in order to sort of seem like good actors and be in compliance, block first and examine their requests later, especially when there's a lot of them. So this is what I meant earlier when I said that I actually do think that the internet is special, because a request to stop a cable operator from broadcasting illegal material would really only impact the cable operator in that material. Whereas a request on Facebook to allow intercession on illegal material might result, for example, in the secret police knowing who all your friends are and what you've said to them lately. And that is different.
Emin, do you want to come in on some of this? I mean, there's an anonymity question here as well, which we haven't really got into, but users remaining anonymous.
I think, again, the context, it's very different from country to country. And in some countries, like in Syria, for example, you not being anonymous can end up, you being killed. Not one or two persons, but, on a massive scale. In Azerbaijan, it's different. I saw it's a crafty autocracy 2.0, member of the Council of Europe. So our government, and I want to thank my government for not killing me and people like me. I mean, this is, you have to say, often that like we have to thank these governments for doing so, for being upgraded autocracy. In my case, let's say, I don't want to be anonymous. I mean, in fact, I remember times when I would take off the battery. Maybe it was, I don't know why, but I started to believe if I talk, and that's what many people in Azerbaijan think, they can listen to you if your battery is on. So we would take the battery, to talk freely in a restaurant, with some of my friends. And that, I think, was a wrong approach. I changed it since then. But since many years, I remember that I just decided to be as public, as transparent as possible. And actually, hidden camera in my flat. And something what happened with Khadija showed that actually you cannot hide from at least my government, They know everything about me. They can film me in my bedroom, And my approach is actually that as a dissident in a country like Azerbaijan, the only thing you can do is stop being paranoid about it and just, stand behind your words and try, to live up to the values you are talking about and to be as transparent about it as possible. But again, this is a very specific case. This is Azerbaijan. It's not North Korea. It's not Syria. Not even Iran. So I don't know how I would behave if I would live in Iran or in North Korea or in Syria. So it's a very different context.
Sure, and we are certainly aware that in a number of countries anonymity is vital, and it's always been a vital right in a sense over the decades and centuries in freedom of expression. So it's one more thing to factor in about who decides, if ever, to hand over sources or decides that someone isn't anonymous anymore, and is that for ISPs to do. Helen, you work with a number of companies, I think, as well as, or businesses as well as authors. Do you have any particular views on companies playing a kind of regulatory role?
I think it's an awful shame that the protection of copyright and the protection of the rights of authors is on the same stage as people who are oppressed by their governments. It puts everything in perspective, but by the same token, you can't get away from the fact that authors have human rights also, but they should not be in competition with the rights of people to simply be safe. So I don't have views for any stronger views on that.
I mean, we have in some ways a broad panel, but I think it's a message from this session and the earlier one that so many of these issues are interconnected, and where you might not expect there's a link, and where there may not be a moral equivalence, maybe a practical or a legal or a regulatory equivalence. We've just got time for one last round of questions. I'm going to take two at the back and one at the front. So, gentlemen at the front here. Yes, you. And then the two right at the back I'm going to take.
First of all, I would like
Sorry, could you
Bakhtiar
say-
Mamadov
Thank you.
from Azerbaijan, Minister of Communication and Information Technologies. First of all, I would like to express thanks to Ireland Chairmanship for organization of this event. And Azerbaijan became very popular, and all attention paid to Azerbaijan. I would like a representative of Minister of Communication to bring your attention to issues that World Economic Forum every year publishes reports in different matters, including the ICT. And this year's report also has showcase about Azerbaijan, how this country within last few years rapidly developed on ICT application. For example, in 2003, when Azerbaijan participated in World Summit on Information Society, Azerbaijan initiated an idea of the converting natural resources into human resources. In 2005, in Tunisia, Azerbaijan suggested a lot of positive things for development of the ICT, and logically, in Kenya, Nairobi, Azerbaijan initiated to host Internet Governance Forum. And my colleagues from Azerbaijan, Emin Husseinov, said that how country could be host of the Internet Governance Forum if country expressing their own sovereign rights, changing of its law, not related with the Internet, its law on access to information in broad terms, where there's a classification of the information resources, couldn't be host of this event. I think it's just, tentative or trends or prejudice attitude to the country. Or my other colleague, Emin, whom I now were for a while and whom I have a great respect, tried to compare our country with Iran and said that action, what happened with Khadija, I don't know who did this, but I agree with my colleagues that I think that it's less interested to the government, maybe for some people who would like to make a black period for Azerbaijan, but in any case, it's not on the interest of the Azerbaijan. It could be attempt to assassination, which is I don't agree, because again, I now or other my colleagues now, Azerbaijani society, that I don't think that even this bad PR could bring these things. And I think my question, in the end, that I believe that, or my question is that we should all take certain actions for making internet free and accessible for everyone. And also, I didn't agree with Emin that Emin has been jailed for allocation of the information, because there's no penal code of Azerbaijan
more than twice your 2 minutes. Thank you.
For
could you
allocation
leave
of
it
the
there?
information.
Thank you very much.
Internet.
I'm going to take last two questions, and they're both right in the very back row, please. I think there's is it a gentleman in the middle of the back row? Is that yes? One, yeah, and then there was a woman to his right. So, thank you.
My name is Alexander Mosheuk. I'm from the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs. First of all, thank you very much, the Irish chairmanship, for hosting this conference on this very important topic, which is also a priority for Sweden. It's important to make clear that human rights apply as well online as offline. Restrictions of freedom of expression should be considered exception. And when restrictions are allowed, they must strictly follow requirements set out in international human rights law. An important principle and rule of thumb should be that blocking and filtering of content should be avoided. The solution to get rid of unwanted substance on the internet is not to extend filtering and blocking. These are blunt tools, and very likely will push us towards a slippery slope that will erode free speech on the internet. One of Sweden's main focus right now on the internet freedom area is the coming Human Rights Council resolution, which is entitled The Promotion, Protection and Enjoyment of Human Rights on the Internet. This resolution is its first of a kind and takes its point of departure that freedom of expression also applies on the internet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, the woman right in the back corner. Yes, the one standing up.
Русский язык. Готовьтесь. Спасибо. Меня зовут Парвина Ибодова, я представляю Таджикистан, я являюсь председателем Ассоциации интернет-сервис-провайдеров. И вначале одна ремарка Эмина, у нас Facebook все-таки не закрыт. Эта ситуация у нас была дней 5, мы ее успешно обошли, точнее, благодаря, кстати, ОБСЕ и в силу того, что госпожа Миятович сделала официальное заявление, Facebook нам открыли. Вот в продолжение этого я хочу вам сказать, что, в принципе, вот 3 вопроса быстренько затрону, да, так как, опять-таки, Азербайджану в целом получилось 10 минут, все-таки я 2-3 минуты буду говорить. Вот блокировка, могут быть хорошие...
I'm sorry, we're near the end, so can you make it 1 minute?
Ничего.
Conciseness is a virtue in this moment.
Блокировка у нас происходит очень интересно. У нас сейчас такой пик этого блокировок этих происходит, когда почти каждый месяц 2-3 сайта блокируют, попадают под блокировку. В принципе, законы могут быть хорошие, правительство нормальное, но у нас есть регулятор, который делает все, что хочет. Такое самодурство, такое, к сожалению, он принимает решения. И, к сожалению, не всегда правительство знает или хочет знать об этом, и все это, ну, грубо говоря, проходит. И мы со стороны провайдеров, да, я сейчас представляю их, могу сказать, что нам некуда деваться. Да, можно обратиться в суд, да, можно обратиться там в Гаагский трибунал, но вы знаете, что, да, вот эти блокировки, мы зависимы от нашего регулятора. В нашем случае там, ну, такой специальный орган есть, служба связи, которая делает все, что, то есть она у нас пишет смс-ки нашим провайдерам. Блокируйте вот этот сайт. То есть вот такое новшество со стороны нашего регулятора. Или СМС, или письмо такое, официальное письмо, по техническим причинам просим заблокировать сайт. Вот такой процесс происходит. По поводу законов. Все-таки я предлагаю, чтобы вот такие высокие, да, гости, форумы и ОБСЕ в частности обращали внимание, когда происходит экспорт законов. Например, по постсоветском пространстве у нас вот такие страны, как Россия или Казахстан, которые претендуют на главенство в области интернет-регулирования, начинают разрабатывать такие модельные законы, а потом пробивать их через свои организации наши, да, ШОС, там, ОДКБ или еще какие-то моменты, которые потом странам, которые не сильно чем-то могут отвечать, могут на себя это принять. Это очень важно. И желательно, чтобы, да, мы хорошо говорим, несколько человек сказала, мы должны говорить и слушать. Конечно, в идеале лучше бы, чтобы нас слушали, чтобы правительство слышало вас всех, потому что официальные заявления, да, хорошо, но нужно работать потеснее, потому что провайдеры, вот бизнес, да, он очень сильно зависит от того, что регулятор с нами делает. Поэтому высоко говорить хорошо, но нужно какие-то подходы находить, чтобы все-таки бизнес не был таким без вины виноватым. Спасибо.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I think you raise a number of issues, but I think the issue around the Shanghai Cooperation Forum is another aspect of we were talking about. Some countries can lead the way in a bad way on regulation, and so can some regional groupings. I just wanted to make one comment myself on the issue around Azerbaijan, since the Internet Governance Forum is going to be held there, and I think Frank LaRue this morning expressed the hope that there might be some open seminars and round tables that would involve civil society, both within the Internet Governance Forum, but in Baku, outside the forum at the time of the meeting. And I think that would be very helpful and desirable, and would show a real commitment to having the sort of open debate we've had here today. There are genuine and serious issues to address there. Index gave its annual journalism award this year to Idrak Abasov, who got beaten up with life-threatening injuries just 2 weeks later. So I think open discussion and clarity on facts as far as we can be clear on them is very helpful. We're almost at an end. I'm going to come back to each of our panelists. They're now going to have to stay within a minute too. And they can either pick up on the comments we've just heard or on any last key issue from this really wide-ranging 2.5-hour session. Emin, I'm going to start with you and come all the way down to Helen.
I will use my time just to comment on my Azeri colleague. Well, first of all, on ICG, I disagree with my friend Amin Husseinov, and I agree with our government. They should absolutely host this event. I was saying the same about Eurovision. This is very good when you host a big international events in Azerbaijan. because as Eurovision showed, it gives amazing media attention to Azerbaijan. And here I absolutely agree with our government, and I think even to give us more opportunity to have open debate, since again the whole attention of world media will be on Azerbaijan, why don't we just organize open debate during these ICGF days on Azerbaijan state television and discuss these things on Azerbaijan state television, and you can show the world how open society we have and how we can open a debate live on Azerbaijan state television. Second point about...
Your minute's almost up.
That's where I should stop.
Okay. Okay. Very, very well disciplined. Thank you. Agnes.
Yeah, I'll make 2 points. The first is that I will invite the member state of the OSCE to adopt the draft declaration on fundamental freedoms in the digital age. I think you have had it circulated for close to a year now. It has gone through various stages. I think it is a fantastic document. It really highlights, it presents the OSCE as a very, as setting a tone, setting a model for the rest of the world, and I think it will be in all of your honor to be able to sign on to this declaration and demonstrate that this OSCE region can actually lead the way on some of those very difficult issues. And the second point I want to make, it has not been raised, but I think it is an essential point, is the question of access to internet. We hinted to it this morning, but didn't get too much into that issue of providing people with access to internet. Article 19 considers access to internet as a fundamental human rights upon which, and therefore a right which imposes a set of positive obligations on governments, and it is something that we are going to advocate for very strongly in the years to come. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Amin has to rush for a plane, but I hope everybody else will stay, but thank you for your contributions.
Trails.
Oh, okay, thank you, Amin. Curry, your 1 minute.
Sure. You know, as I said before, I don't think copying is ever going to get harder. I don't think we know how to take material that's on the internet and get it off of the internet. It's my friend John Perry Barlow says that that's like getting food coloring out of a swimming pool. It's very easy to put it in the swimming pool, very hard to remove it. And I don't think that these are necessarily good things. There's lots of stuff that we can find copied, our personal information, the facts of our lives, that we might not be happy about. But it's not ideological to acknowledge the technical reality of the internet. It is ideological in the worst way to say that somehow, if we just wish hard enough or legislate enough, we can change those underlying technical realities of the internet. What I hope we do as we regulate the internet and try to solve the problems that it creates is find problems that are solutions that are fit for purpose, that don't assume that information can be removed from the internet, that don't assume that copying will someday fall, and instead focus on ways that, in the reality of the internet, we can make the world a better place for everyone.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you. I've been troubled for the last few minutes because while I agreed with much that you said, Corey, I'm so uncomfortable with the argument that the internet is special and different, and we must acknowledge the logic of that. Because it seems to me that if we follow that pathway, we run the risk of losing the benefit for the internet of the hard-fought achievements and freedoms of the international human rights system, including, and above all, freedom of expression. The International Framework for Freedom of Expression has the right as the norm and the exception as, and the regulation or the limitation as a very rare exception. That's been achieved as a matter of law and of standards. We need to protect it and apply it in the internet space. Unless we do so, then we run the risk that the internet will not be able to fulfill the potential acknowledged for it today of being, perhaps in all of history, the most extraordinary vehicle for the delivery of all human rights that we've ever seen. And to the extent that the internet is special, I think that's the only case that I would make for its speciality and its different nature. And finally, again, my thought from the very outset, don't imagine all of this is new. There's a lot of work that's been done many decades past that can give us guidance, principled guidance, to find the solutions to the dilemmas we've been discussing today. Go back to the MacBride report of 1980 on the Global Communications Order. It's a rich mine of ideas which speak directly to the challenges we're confronting.
Thank you very much. Helen, the last word with you.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with Michael O'Flaherty. The internet is not different. It should be treated in a similar fashion, and we shouldn't lose out on all of we have learnt already in terms of human rights legislation. Different freedoms can coexist, and recognition of intellectual property rights on the internet does not have to conflict with the freedom of expression. What is required is a balancing of the rights, and artists have right to a freedom of expression also.
Thank you very much. Before I thank the panelists, I want to just tell you that when this session does finish, there are buses waiting outside to take you to the Google Big Tent. So if you can first collect your coats if you need to from the concierge, then you get on those buses in the courtyard. I would like to thank all of you and the online audience, especially the panelists. I think we've had a very rich debate. We don't agree on everything, but I think if we're in an OSCE conference, we can say we do agree on defending fundamental freedoms. Thank you.